All right, again, thank you, Mr. Burnett, for this interview. If you can begin by telling a little bit about your background.
Okay, I finished my master's degree at the University of Alabama in December of 2010 and came to work here in January of 2011, so I've now been here for 13 years.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's proceed with the interview. If it's okay, please share the standards that you are currently teaching for your specific content area.
In economics, we are currently about to take the mid-9 weeks test with a focus on the standards 4 through 6. And then next week we'll be starting on standard 7 as we wrap up standard 6. In my history class, we're currently on standards 8 through 11, which cover World War II and the Cold War that begins right after.
Mhm. What lessons are you currently working on to ensure that students are meeting those standards?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question.
I'm sorry, what lessons are you currently working on to make sure that the students are meeting those standards?
Well, we are in both classes about to take our mid-9 weeks test, so of course that assessment tool will give me a good idea of how much we need to review before we start the next set of standards. And then in both of the courses, where we've left off before this mid-9 weeks test, there's a direct logical connection between that and where we're picking back up. So I think of it as a form of scaffolding. We've laid the groundwork for where we're going with it next.
What data do you use to determine whether or not your lesson was a success?
Well, of course, always with our quizzes and tests, but also from the interaction that I have with the students. We have frequent class discussions, and I also like to pose questions to my students to which they have to make conclusions, as in history, perhaps predicting what's going to happen next based on what had just happened, or economics, being able to make a step forward past where we've gone using ideas from the concepts that we've already been applying.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, our school, when it comes to test scores, is at the bottom end of the spectrum. So what are some things that you think we can do to help get our test scores up? And what do you think is actually, is at the gist of the problem? Why do you think they're low to begin with?
Well, I'll start at the gist of the problem, and it's pretty obvious to me. The students are not on grade level whenever they reach high school.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we are testing students, like what I've recently heard when they're coming into the 9th grade and only one of them is on the 9th grade reading level,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a problem because, and I do emphasize reading because reading is the most important basic skill to understanding social studies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always, with my students as they're coming in, make my own assessment of their reading
Mm-hmm.
and see, how much support that I need to give them starting off and how close my students are to being on the same level. But I don't think anything is going to improve until we improve the reading level of the students coming into the high school, because at the high school, from what I see, we're already doing what we need to do at this point.
Mm-hmm. How would you suggest teachers, especially those in the content area, develop a plan to help improve test scores? What kind of plan do you think we need to put in place?
Well, first off, I never focus on standardized test scores.
Okay.
I focus on individual students, finding out what their problems are and seeing how I can help them. I have found standardized testing material that I've seen to be culturally biased, to be regionally biased, and especially to be socioeconomically biased.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as my students, when they first start with me, if they're comfortable with doing so in class, I have them read a passage aloud in front of everyone. If not, I speak to them outside privately and have them read a passage so that I can see how well they can read first of all. And then we move on to, can you explain it back to me? Can we write about it? And I try to evaluate each of my students and their reading ability at the very beginning of the year so that I can see what our starting point is.
And that's awesome. I think that's what we were talking about yesterday when you were telling me about how you accommodate students' learning levels.
Right, and I mean, you don't even have to be obvious about it because students are used to read alouds, and if you just start a read aloud in the class, you know, you're not putting the tension on them of doing something formal. They're just reading because it's coming around to being their turn.
That's awesome. What would you say are the strengths at Greene County High School?
For one thing, we've got a lot of veteran educators. I brought up recently in a faculty meeting that, you know, at the time I'd been here over a dozen years, and when I looked around the room, over half the teachers in the room still had seniority on here. And the other thing is, I think that we have a strong connection to our students. I did my student teaching and some of my internships in schools that had much larger student populations. And of course, there might be some advantages to that, but the students, there were so many students that most of the students and most of the teachers didn't even know each other.
Right. And you hit on this just a few minutes ago, but if you can go a little further with it, what would you say are some of the strengths?
Well, the personal connection to the students, the experience that we have here, and one of the huge ones is our class size. I mean, my largest class right now is 16 students. And when I was student teaching, a couple of our classes were 30 plus. And you just can't provide the level of attention to students in that setting that they need. The other thing, since COVID, we finally gotten the funding and the technical support and the technology that we should have gotten years ago.
Right. Well, we both operate in the capacity of mentors at our school. For new teachers coming into the system, what advice would you give them if they want to help contribute to improving the test score?
First off, I would tell them forget the test score. Work on making your personal connection with the student. Find out what the student needs and figure out how you can help them succeed. And for those that are hung up on test scores, if we take care of the students, we get the students to do the best that they can do, the test scores are going to take care of themselves.
Wow. Well, that's absolutely awesome, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.